Okay, is this close enough? Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I was teaching at Newman High School and teaching English and physical education, and I was coaching the girls' basketball team. And one of the teachers, who was a good friend of Jimmy's, came down here, made a special trip to tell him, you need to get up there and meet that coach. I'm not going to tell you what else he said, but anyway, that was enough. So Jimmy came to a ball game that I was coaching, and he was out in the lobby to get refreshments, and I had a date with somebody, and he said, and now Jim is called Hutch. My husband, Jimmy, was called Hut. And they said, Hut, what you doing up here? He said, oh, I'm just looking around, and he didn't declare what he was up there for. And so the guy I had a date with said, well, come on up here and sit with me. My date is the girls' basketball coach. So he thought, oh, that's a good opportunity. Well, that night, or the next night, he called Miss Ruth Young, who taught school at Newman High School, and she had also taught him. And she thought that he was calling to talk to her. She was an old maid, but a real old maid. and so he said, Miss Ruth, I believe you have somebody there living with you that I might like to have a date with. Would you put in a good word for me? And she said, yes, she would. And he called me for a date, but then I broke it because I was sick, and he thought, well, I didn't want to go with him. But he called me back, and so the rest is history.
It is. So then you got married in 1960.
We did.
And then Beth and Jimmy came along.
They did. I taught 2 years before I married and 2 years after I married. And I went to LaGrange College to renew my certificate. And I renewed it, and I never have used it, so I guess it's still good. But anyway, I got pregnant with Beth, and I was fortunate enough that I did not have to go back to teach. But I didn't work at the hardware store then. I don't know how he got by without me, because he couldn't later. But I had Beth, and then we had Jim, and it wasn't until later that I started working at the hardware store and selling Watkins and other things.
All right, well, that was my next question. Which one of your children is the oldest or the older? And I was wondering if each one of you would like to say something about your dad.
She's the oldest, I'll let her go.
Sure. So I think if you had ever met my dad, you would know that he was all about a story and connecting people. So I just kind of want to, if you didn't know him, you'll get a glimpse of who he is after this story. And so growing up in Senoia, at that time it was about 800 people. I mean, it's kind of amazing that how connected he was to people before the internet, before Facebook. He just kind of knew things and could connect people. So when I graduated high school, and after I was at Agnes Scott for 2 years, I decided I wanted to go to the University of Georgia, which he was thrilled about. And he came home one day before I was going to Georgia, before I was rushing, and he's like, so Beth, I just went and met this endodontist. He worked on my teeth in Atlanta, and you know, his daughter is at Georgia, and she's in charge of a ministry. And I said, well, okay, what's your name? He's like, I don't know, but you need to meet her. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to meet? The only criteria I know is the daughter of my dad's endodontist. So after I rushed, after I went to sorority, the big thing to do was to go to the sorority house on Thursday nights for fried chicken night. And I was sitting there, and granted, I mean, University of Georgia wasn't as big as it is now. But it was still about 25,000 people. So I was sitting there and talking to, meeting some folks and talking to this woman, and I said, well, where are you from? What do you do? And she said, well, I'm in ministry here in Georgia. And I said, well, is your dad an endodontist? She said, yes, he is. She said, your father is a patient of my dad's. I'm like, yes, he is. She said, I didn't know your name. I said, I didn't know your name. And she said, I've been looking for you. And she said, my dad, her dad, was such an introvert. He never talked about his patients, never was excited about a patient. She said, your dad must be something else. To bring him out and for him to talk and for him to want me to meet you. And I think, that was what he was all about. It was connecting people with people, and to be in such a small town and get to know all the people he did outside of Senoia, but then be able to connect the dots of people that were in Senoia too was pretty amazing. So, yeah. That really encapsulates who he is to me.
Thanks, Beth.
What you want to say?
I guess one thing I was gonna add to that is, when I was growing up, I grew up in the hardware store, and I always told people that later on they asked me, they said, where'd you go to college? I told them where I went to college, got my business degree. And I told them, I said, but the most important thing I did, best education I could ever have in my life, was to work in a retail hardware business with my father and my mother. And I told him, I said, he taught me about people, how to treat people right. And it was just one of those stories where I told him, I said, that was the best education I could have, how I've learned to deal with people all my life. And one thing that what my mom touched on, funny story about, years ago, when we, like she said, she wasn't in the business, and then as I got older, she was in the business with us, and it would be on Saturday, and Saturday in the retail hardware business is the busiest day. We had more foot traffic, more people in the store, and my mom would help on Saturdays. And occasionally, this might have been before cell phones, my dad would say, Jim, he said, go down there and look on that sign and see where that yard sale or estate sale is, because I can't get your mother. You need to go find her and tell her we need help in the store. And so I would have to go find out, and sure enough, because he'd call the house and she wouldn't answer, he knew where she was. And people would put up the little signs everywhere. He said, go look over there. Where's that sign? Where's that sign? And sure enough, I'd drive there, and there she was. I said, Daddy is mad. You need to get to the store. We need some help because we're busy.
I didn't know you were going to tell that.
And she still goes to the state sales.
I'm just about through. We just had a great big
Ralph's
sale.
getting used to it.
And,
I told her she could get anything she wanted as long as it fit in the glove compartment.
but I don't pay attention to that.
That's a delivery receipt.
But we just had a big sale, and they thought, well, we had every room in Ralph's house filled, and both garages, and I said, no, I'm not dead yet. You can't call it an estate
Okay, well, Beth, we know that Jim worked alongside his dad in the store, but we were wondering if you spent any time in the store.
Well, yeah, I did. One of the things that I did growing up was to do inventory. And so I can distinctly remember being at the back of the store, not the very back, but kind of the far back, and doing inventory on nails and figuring out how to do that. So, I figured out how to do that. I'm like, Dad, I'm counting them and I'm weighing them, and then I'm just kind of guessing. He's like, fine, just get some on paper. So I did inventory, and then, I worked some in the store. I would come in on Saturday, but that was really, Jim did a better job at that. So he sent me out to, once I graduated high school, he's like, so Beth, you're gonna be working this summer. you're gonna be working before you go to school, so you just need to go out and get a job. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I have a little bit of experience. And, you know, I don't really know how they did that. They worked so much. I mean, he was on his feet all the time, and it was no air conditioning. And there was never, we never saw him unhappy there. That was his passion, was being at the hardware store. It was his pulpit. It was, you know, people came to him. But I still, he must have been really smart, because I don't know how he kept up with everything. I mean, you know, he said in the video, you dig? That was the joke, you dig, and you would find a lower price. So, you know, I don't know how he did it. And then I remember, you know, driving home from when I was in pharmaceutical sales in Virginia. I would drive home and get home really late to Senoia when I visited, and he would still be at the store. He and Mom would still be at the store. It was really late. They would be working, and he worked all the time, but he loved it. It was his passion.
Okay, hey Jimmy, what was it like? What's a typical day with your dad at the store?
I was going to say, I remember getting upset. but you know, a typical day, and back to what Beth was talking about, I got really good at guesstimating, because I had to do it all those other years, doing the inventory, and I could look at something and say, yep, that's 75. I wrote it down, and I was good, and I could move on. But you know, a typical day was getting there at 8 o'clock in the morning. And as I got older, when I was little, I'd go to the store with him on Saturday. And he knew he could always get me up and get me to go to the store with him, because we would go out to the one restaurant that was here in Senoia, and I could get pancakes and hot chocolate or whatever when I was 12, 13 years old. So I would get up and go with him, and then by 10 or 11 o'clock rolled around, I was ready to go home, you know. But a typical day was getting there at 8 o'clock in the morning. He and I would open up, and we always had, we had a lot of good people over the years that worked for us, you know, whether it was, you know, younger guys in high school or older men that had retired and wanted something to do 3 or 4 days a week. And, you know, we would get up there, maybe go get some breakfast, I would go get it, bring it back. And you never knew what character you were going to see in the store. And it was, you know, we had a lot of characters work for us, but we had a lot of characters that were customers that came in the store also.
So anybody here been in the store?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Customers, a lot of customers in here, yeah.
Any particular characters or any particular stories?
I won't say anything about anybody in here, so. Yeah.
Surely you can tell us something about Hal.
Yeah.
I even knew that when his granddaddy lived.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It was across the street. Oh,
Yeah.
no, his granddaddy, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, and you know, just a small town where everybody kind of knew everybody. You knew most of your customers by their name. A lot of times because we were writing it on a charge ticket and charging them, you know. So I had to learn their name, you know. But it was just a very interesting place to grow up.
Jane, can you think of any particular character or any particular instance in the store that's worth retelling?
What about the yellow ribbon award?
Oh, there were 3 nice ladies. And they were not always so easy to wait on. They knew what they wanted, but they didn't know how to tell Jimmy exactly. So what he said he had was a yellow ribbon award. And if they were the hardest to please customer or the hardest to get what they wanted, you got the yellow ribbon award. So, but these 3 ladies were making dolls and they were doing other things. And they're 3 of our good friends. But one of them first came to the store and she asked for, let's see, an 8-foot-long nail. And I think it was an 8-inch nail.
It was an 8-penny nail, and she got it with an 8-foot-long nail or something.
I was trying to think of some of the other people. What?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many. It's hard to remember.
Well, I'll tell you a little funny incident as I think about it. This guy broke in the hardware store, and he went under, maybe a lot of you don't know it, but there were steps down where, right there where Matt's Pizza is now. There were steps that go down there, and that was the basement. Some people think we've got a car there, but we don't. But anyway, he went in up through there, and so the alarm went off, and so Jimmy came to town, and the policemen were already there, and they had him already out there. He said, "No, Miss Jimmy, I didn't break in. They couldn't get him to convince it, and so Jimmy called his name, and he said, so and so, just go ahead and admit it. Yes, sir, Mr. Jimmy, I did it. But the bad part of the story is he had gotten out of the basement, gone back down through the hole he got through and outside, and he had 2 pair of boots. And they were both defective. Jimmy was fixing to mail them back to the let me tell a little story. It was I was a mess then, and I'm kind of a mess now, but full of fun. And we had not been married long, and we had a night watchman named Carl Drake. A good, nice fella, but not your best night watchman, I guess. He was a little bit afraid too. So somebody called me and told me that Jimmy had left the hardware store open, and for me to be sure to tell him. He had gone to a Lions Club meeting. So Carl Drake stopped him on the way back up from the Lions Club to go into the hardware store and check it out. So when he did, I had come up there to see if he was all right. I sneaked back there, right there where they would come down at the door. And so when they came down, Jimmy was first, and Carl was right behind him. And I said, "This is a stick-up." and so Jimmy told me, "Honey, don't do that anymore." He said, "Carl probably just about shot me." But Carl
He wasn't running the other way.
Mr. Drake flew to the back of the store. That was not a good thing for me.
Well, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at our display board out there, you'll see some lovely pictures from that 1960 wedding with Jimmy and Jane, and pictures of Jim and Beth when they were little, some family pictures, and lots of pictures of actually inside Hutchinson's Hardware. If you didn't get enough on our film today, there's more pictures out there to look at. But Hutchinson's Hardware is not Jimmy's only claim to fame. He is also Senoia's and Georgia's youngest mayor. So I think, Beth, you want to tell us a little bit about that, what it was like to have your dad be the mayor of town, and what it was like for your husband to be the mayor?
Oh, you go first.
I think we were too young.
Well,
Oh, you were?
I was 8 months old.
Oh, you were. I've got an idea. Let's have Jane tell us now.
okay, if you out in the hall didn't hear that, Jim wasn't born when Jimmy was first mayor of Senoia. And when they said that he was Georgia's youngest mayor, he had just turned 25. And they did a wonderful write-up about him in the Parade magazine of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And
I will interrupt you for just a minute, Jane, and show everybody that Jane is donating tonight the copies from that magazine. There are 3 pages of it. Look at that beautiful picture of Jimmy with Beth, and then a family picture on the other page. We're going to get these matted, 3 mats in 1 frame, and it'll be up on display here. soon, but this is Ellis.
This is a good picture of.
This is Ellis
Greg.
here.
Greg, this is a great picture of your daddy. He's got a lot of hair then.
Greg's right there.
And there's also a real good picture of Frank Hoger.
You can read all about it.
Well, now, the children, they both were born while he was mayor, because he was mayor for about 9 or 10 years, something like that. But I used to say the best days of my life were when he was mayor. I didn't mean it was good days. I meant he had a meeting practically every night. But as he said, I put up with his civic duties. I was doing things too. But he also had to be in charge of court. Now, if you think this wasn't tough, he handled court every Monday night. And he would have to be over people who were his customers. And as some of the people in this article said, he always did the right thing, regardless if it hurt him or not. One man, I won't name him, he's a friend of ours too, but he said that he couldn't fight City Hall and still trade with Jimmy. So he quit trading with him for about 2 years, and he was one of our best customers, because Jimmy put his people who worked for him on the street working, and he wanted him to have a special favor, and they had to serve out what they had to do. But then he also had more duties as a mayor then than they do now.
But he was justice of the feast.
Yeah,
Right.
justice.
Yeah, he was justice at the feast.
It could be like Andy Griffith.
I'll tell about one situation which was it was something else. I don't know if any of y'all in here knew about this, but my sister and her husband were visiting me, and they wanted to come to the hardware store to get some spray paint. And they stayed, and they stayed, and they stayed. And I didn't think anything about it. I just thought my brother-in-law was really looking at all the inventory. Well, when they came home, he said, honey, you just don't know what a mess I've been in, and I didn't know to go help. What had happened, I'll go ahead and say it. I won't say his name. Our police chief had gotten aggravated, or I don't know what. Anyway, with a person that he had arrested, and he hit him with his fist. He tried, and the guy ducked, and he hit we used to have a jail here. He hit his hand on the rods and broke his finger in his hand. Well, he used the other hand. He was going to hit him like this. The guy ducked again, and he broke his other hand. All right. This was a bad, bad time, and I guess I shouldn't have started this story. But anyway, I'll finish it. There were all of these people on this side of the road, and there were all of these people on the other side of the road. It was black on this side and white on this side. And Jimmy wanted them to go home, and the police chief wanted to make them go home, and they said, we're not going home until these other people go home. Well, finally, one state patrolman says, Jimmy, do you want me to shoot in the crowd? He said, no, don't shoot in the crowd. He said, I know just the person that can handle this. So, most of you know the name if you don't know him. He called Mr. Lamar Potts. And Mr. Lamar Potts came. He was the sheriff of Coweta County, and he was in the movie and the book by Margaret Ann Barnes, Murder in Coweta County. Mr. Lamar Potts came. He got the biggest guy that was white and got him. He told him to go home. They said, no, we're not going home. He got him by the seat of his pants, and he said, big boy, you're fixing to go home. And he scooted him all off, and the guy went home, and everybody went home.
Wow. On that note, I am sure that not ask the question that you are sitting there dying to know. So if anyone has any questions for Jane or Beth or Jimmy, this would be a good time to ask them. Anybody?
What year did the hardware store close?
It closed in 2007. We had a big auction. The city was kind enough to let us close the street that, well, it was a red light there at one time. It's now just stopped. Closed it all the way up as far as we needed it, up toward the city hall.
Yeah, so it was 12 years ago this month, actually. And we closed in 2006 and then sold the building in 2007. Yeah, so we had a big auction in November, 12 years ago. Yeah. That's why I was trying to remember stories. It was 12 years ago. And before that.
So how many items were at that auction, Mom? It was like 1,100 items at that auction.
Oh, more than that, more than that.
It was, I drove down from Richmond for the auction, and the Main Street was closed, and there was stuff all in front of the store and all in the street right in front of what was the hardware store. I mean, it was items I had never seen before.
We started at 8 in the morning and had 2 auctioneers swapping out, and we finished at 8 o'clock that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got a question. So what did you do with the items that didn't sell?
Still got them.
So I can answer that in part. Mom and Dad, they were gracious enough to let Jim and I choose an item that we wanted.
More than one.
Well, really,
Okay, 2.
a couple of really big items. So I don't know if you all had ever been to the back of the store, but Dad had this thing we called a bolt bin. It was a 100-year-old display piece. That was, it's basically 100 drawers of
That were triangular drawers.
triangular drawers that sat on a rod, and the base was square and it spins. And I took it and had it stripped, and it's actually stamped in French, the size of the bolts. And so I got that, and then Jim got, he got a lot. He got the safe and he got the cash register, but he got the old Hutchinson hardware sign. But then the funniest part is when we were, and the auction had occurred, and there was still a whole lot of stuff in the back of the store. And so we were pulling stuff out, and all of a sudden, we unearthed an entire, bolt bin. It's about the size of between the Senoia, each of the Senoia signs is that wide. And it was all these little cubby holes, and it has writing in pencil from my great-grandfather. And all these things, and I thought, I gotta have this.
Yeah.
So I tagged that before anybody could tag it, and it's in the basement of our home.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, but the rest of the stuff, Mom has.
I've gotten rid of a pretty good bit of it, but, well, we were going to have a second auction. And
Stay tuned.
No.
well, anyway, we did not agree to have another auction.
Yeah.
Jimmy, tell us about the safe.
Well, I moved, ever since I moved it, I've moved 4 times, and I've had to pay about $150 every time I've moved it, wherever to Kansas and back. But it's really probably not worth anything to anybody else but me. But it's probably about 600 pounds. It has the steel casters, and I've moved it. I've got a guy with a rollback wrecker that has moved it for me. He's moved it for me 4 times. But when we moved it out of the store, it was back behind the cash register in the store. And the combination still works. And only 2 people need the combination, well, 3. But I don't know if she remembers it anymore. But
I don't remember.
I have it, my dad had it, and that was it.
You go
And-
around
and-
so many times, you come back so many times.
We have another number. But, so it's probably about 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide, like I said, 600 pounds. But when I had the guy move it for me, we still had the old hardwood floor in the store, and he hooked up a cable and started dragging it across there. And he and I both thought it was gonna go through the floor and hit the ground, but it didn't. And like I said, now it's in my garage, and I've moved it several times. But the cash register was my great grandfather's. It was a national cash register, and it's on the big wooden bin. Has several drawers where I was told all salesmen could use the different drawers. And it's, I think it was built, I looked it up, and it was built between like 1885 and 1910. And so and it's all it's all nickel or brass, and so I need to get it refinished, but I just hadn't done it. Hal gave me a number of somebody that could maybe do it, but I just hadn't done that yet.
So I just remembered one more, this, is it working?
Try this.
Yeah.
Okay. I just remembered one more thing that I did get, but I had to buy it at the auction, and I couldn't believe that he put it in the auction, but it looked new because it was his desk that had everything piled on it for years. So I have his desk, and it was funny because Jim and I knew he would pull out this, you could pull out this one area to write on, and it was underneath that where he had masking tape stuck on there, and that was the combination of the safe. No, he pulled it off.
He pulled it off.
He pulled it off before the auction.
There you go.
So, yeah, so I have his desk.
I remember when we had different people working for us. We had Hazel Hubbard, who did a great job for us, and Linda Stell, who has just moved from here, and Michelle Johnson. And Linda Stell said that she was jealous because Jimmy and we don't know what we would have done without young Jim Barnett. He started working for Jimmy when he was about 13, and he went in the service, and he'd come back and help us. He worked for Georgia Power, and he'd come back and work on his days off. He loved the hardware store. And Jim Maurice did some of that too. But Linda Stell said she was really jealous because we cleaned off the desk for Michelle, and we didn't for her.
We got a computer.
And we got a computer. And air conditioning.
Yeah.
And air conditioning. So she said, I don't know what Michelle has that we didn't have.
All right, here we go. Vicki?
Tell about the Georgia Tech and Georgia rivalry that went on up there.
Well, Trey Beverly was supposed to have been here. He told me he was coming. I don't think he's out there anywhere, is he? Okay. Well, anyway, they had a big rivalry with Georgia and Georgia Tech. Jimmy being the Georgia Bulldogs. And so if Georgia won, Jimmy would decorate Trey's, well, at one time, he decorated his, what is the journal that the paper that he had?
East Coweta Journal.
The East Coweta Journal. Jimmy just really decorated that and really did it up. Well, Jan Bowl and Bobby Bowl, who owned the veranda, Jan was a nice guy, but he just didn't understand. And Trey just egged it on. He said, oh, Jimmy, I think he wrote in the paper, why did you mess up his office? It was such a, and Trey said, you just really did a mess. And I don't know, Trey finally told him, said, Jan, this is what we do to each other when Georgia wins and Tech loses. And by the way, I think Jimmy got to decorate Trey and Frank Holberg and Carl McKnight more than they decorated him. But let me say this, Jimmy could not have had better Georgia Tech friends. Trey and Carl McKnight used to call Jimmy every day. they try to tell him about who was in jail, and then one go get to play ball.
From the football team.
Or who had gotten hurt, or what was going on, and they talked just about every day. And we went we went more than once, but one time they said, now we want y'all to come up here before the game, and we are going to treat you royally. Well, we got there, and here comes Trey with this little dish towel, a fancy towel over his arm, and Carl and whoever had fixed us the most beautiful steaks and everything, and served us right there at the varsity in that back hole back there where he parked that bus that he had. But it was one time Joe Morgan painted when Auburn beat Georgia. She painted his Gulf oil truck orange.
Did y'all have box seats there one time for the tech game?
Yeah, well, Jimmy had, sometimes it's who you know, not what you know. And there's a friend of his, it was well, I don't know if it's an ex-girlfriend or not, but they had the finest box seats at Georgia Tech. And she said, there's two things you cannot do. You cannot wear red and black, and you cannot cheer when Georgia scores. And so Jimmy and I felt like we kind of gotten a divorce from him. and so, but we did go up there and enjoyed sitting up there and having all that wonderful food. And this girl sitting on the other, I was sitting here and Jimmy was here, and this girl was over there, and she finally looked at Jimmy and she said, "Are you a Georgia fan?" And he said, Why do you say that? He said, "Well, I see your foot just going, But she said, "I am too, but my husband is the trainer for Georgia Tech."
Hey, Beth, I see another question back there.
Yes, we're fairly new to the area, and I know the location is on like the west side of Main Street, I guess, but what stores today are in the space that was the hardware store?
Okay, let me tell you this, to kind of get a little background. Jimmy's grandfather started a hardware store across the street, which is where I believe I about figured out where Harold Sewell's mother and daddy had. It's where the little Dutch boy is up there, Dutch girl.
Beyond the door today.
Yeah, where the
It was right in one of those buildings.
where beyond the door was. Okay, that was called, Callie, do you remember when it was Senoia Hardware? Okay, and ironically, Frank Holberg, the one we call Buddy, his great uncle, Mr. Walt Arnold, and Mr. Lee Hutchinson were partners together, and that was Senoia Hardware. And they went out in about 46. Do you think that's about the time your mother and daddy started?
Yes.
And I believe that, and I don't know this for a fact, I believe that Holberg's got, or Mr. Arnold got that building, and they probably got a lot of the hardware. I don't know that for a fact. But the stores that are where Hutchinson, it was Hutchinson Motor Company until about 1956 or 58. Wow. And
That's where,
so where the places are now is Table Talk is on the corner, Edward Jones,
it was that whole ground that they built.
all the way up to where the florist was.
Flowers
We
house.
had those 3 lots over there.
Oh,
And
wow.
Mass Peace.
I was thinking it was on the other side.
No.
With the arches.
No, well, we do have arches.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the Table Talk. The one that's more prominent is on a little further down the next block across from the Holbergs. Isn't it?
It's not
With those
that.
arches?
No, it's not, it's
Is that
not
what
that.
now?
Now, listen, don't ask me west or north side of the. I just know across the street, where Table Talk is now. And,
Okay.
and then where Matt's Pizza is, we had,
Nails
nails
There
in,
used to be a garage there, Marvin.
in the back there.
in the, Mr.
Where
Howard
they would work on Ford cars.
You know, there's a picture out there in the hallway when it was Ford Motor Company.
Yes.
And you'll see an actual painting on the side of the building on the CV Street side. You'll see a painting there done by Ford, I guess. I don't know. But,
Now, Callie, you didn't know that, now Callie knew Jimmy growing up too, and you didn't know that Maureen was gonna put all of his things on your sign, did you? Oh, okay, the sign that said, Hutchinson Hardware was actually painted by some of the people that have been with the movie company here. And they were with the movie The War with Kevin Costner. And I got my picture made with Kevin Costner. And Cooper Gooden Jr. and Mary Louise Masterson and can't remember. Anyway, the ones in fried green tomatoes. But anyway, let me see, where was I going with this? Oh, the sign, the one that said Hutchinson Hardware, used to be a golf sign. And Jimmy had somebody to put the two golf signs together so that it would keep them. And then the movie people, this girl got up there and she said, "Can I paint your sign for you?" And we said yes. But at the auction, Scott Tigelaw bought that sign. And it is now down at Bistro Hillary.
Oh.
Yes, sir, I've met you again now.
Little stick. You used to have a gas pump right around the corner, right?
Yes,
What
yeah.
happened to that gas pump? Those are antiques now. Those are.
We sold those at the auction.
Oh, okay.
We had one from 1915 that had been in front of the store.
Wow.
It was the old Fry gas pump, had the glass globe.
Yeah.
And so back when A-Miles, C-Miles, when they fill those up, and we had that in a warehouse and we sold that at the auction. But the other ones were probably, the pumps you're talking about were probably from the 70s and 80s, so they weren't as old. But we had some old ones that we sold at the auction that were from the 50s and 60s and a bunch of golf signs and things like that. But yeah, we only have one of the 1915, 17, whatever it was. We sold it.
Okay.
So how long did you sell cars? How long did you own the Ford?
From 1928 to about 1940s or 50s.
46.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
So-
in that movie, Jimmy said that they, I think in that movie when Jimmy said that Ford wanted him to get a bigger chauffeur case, that was in 1946, and so his father just said, "No, you just go. We'll do something else."
Because I have a key tag that has Hutchinson Motor Company on it, and I've got it in my pocket. I'll show it to you. But it has Hutchinson Motor Company, Senoia, Georgia, registered Ford dealer number 67. And so I guess it was the 67th one in the U.S. I don't know, but I was younger and just happened to get it from my dad and put it on the keychain. And I told her I wish I had another one to give here, but I only have one that I could found. And I've kept it all these years and never really, when I was younger, never thought that much about it. But I think it kind of coincided with them at Senoia Hardware kind of retiring and getting out, and then couldn't get cars like my dad has always told me after around World War II, and they were phasing out and they went strictly to hardware. But I've got a calendar that a customer brought in to us that was from 1955. It was the year before my grandfather passed away, and it has Hutchinson Motor Company, but it has complete line of hardware. And our phone number was number 1. But I've got a big poster that we had framed, and my sister had framed.
Very nice.
Dad, don't you have a yardstick too?
Yeah, I've got a yardstick that has like Hutchinson Motor Company.
You don't have two of those, do you?
I have one, that's the only one I know of, yeah.
Oh, darn.
We might find one later. But his motto was, "You must be satisfied." And it had phone number 1 on there, Hutchinson Motor Company.
Well, I still have about 3/4 of a warehouse that I have not gone through.
We'll get to it.
We're patient, we're patient.
And Jim's room is still packed up too. I keep thinking I'm gonna get that bedroom fixed, but I can't get everything out of there.
No hurry.
No hurry.
Anybody else have anything? No? Well, we certainly have had a lovely evening here tonight. Thank you very, very much, Beth, Jane. We appreciate you giving us your time today. Thank everyone else for coming, and I think Doug has something for you.
Yeah, just thank you so much for bringing Senoia's history alive tonight. That's just awesome, awesome story. So just a little something to say thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, so thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
but does Doug have something to read?
Oh, he does, Doug. Yes. Before we close, Jane has asked if someone would read this tribute to Jimmy.
It was a tribute to Jimmy by Paul Ferguson.
This is from Paul Ferguson of Senoia. I consider the movie It's a Wonderful Life one of the few movies of true value and really great worth. It's the story of a man named George Bailey who had dreams and goals in life, but who had to abandon them to serve his family and community when his father died unexpectedly. An angel named Clarence shows us how important his life was to his community. I've been blessed to know a real-life George Bailey, and Senoia and Coweta County have been similarly blessed. He was the second person I met when my family and I moved to Senoia. I knew at that first meeting that he was a special person with a special family. One of the very first things he did was to invite me to his church. He often talked to me about his love for the University of Georgia and of his time there. It was necessarily short because he had to abandon his dreams and come home to take over his father's hardware store. Hang on one second.
Let me switch out. Just switch it.
Let me borrow that one instead.
Okay.
Just hang off of that. Let's just turn it off. Okay. This should be a little bit better. Through the years, we had many great conversations, but at some point he would always turn the talk to his time at the University of Georgia. There is no way that I or anyone else can adequately describe what he meant to this community. He contributed his time, his resources, and most importantly himself to work for what was best for Senoia. He knew and loved everyone in Senoia. He always had a smile and a kind word for everyone. He would get up in the middle of the night and open up to help someone in need. We all knew him as Mr. Jimmy. Don Piper states, "When you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life." So, I think our batteries are dying. I just try and speak loud. When you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, you will rejoice and the world will cry. That's the choice we have from the time we're born until we die. Mr. Jimmy lived such a life, and my tears flow, even while knowing that Jimmy rejoices in heaven and is looking upon the face of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is factual to say Jimmy Hutchinson truly lived a wonderful life, and our lives were made better and blessed for it. Paul Ferguson in Senoia on February 14, 2009.
All right, I don't think this is working.
So we just Just talk loud.
Okay. I could do that.
That means it's time for us to stop.
Just once again, thanks Beth and Jim and Jane for coming tonight, and thank all of you for coming out.
Thanks, everybody. That's it. You haven't done one yet?
You know, I made a meeting in the store or something like that. Yeah, I
Everybody's not
yeah, thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for having us. I, you know, something that I'm doing. I guess it says Hutchinson Arnold.
Yeah, we should probably.
So I guess it was the 67th in the U.S. I think
Well, yeah, we gotta, they could probably go 2 meetings, but.
That's right.
They're not gonna,
Yeah.
at least.
There's a picture of there's a picture of the hunter I had. See, it had you know, something similar to what they did. Well, it's not, but I don't think it is. It's written in that picture, but you see where it has a smoke out there. And I was the one from my grandpa died. We drowned in the so my dad said, George, and my customer came to and had it rolled up. He said, Jim, where's your dad? I said, well, not here. I said, I got some on the show. They're putting his dad's house out in the 80s or 90s. It was in pristine condition. He said, I said, well, how much you want for it? He said, I'll tip it. And he gave it. So we had it started. Yeah. Thank you. Thank y'all for coming. And thank y'all for coming. Thank you. Thank y'all for coming. Hope we didn't bore y'all. You've heard her talk.
But this is something that
Got more stories.
for a man who I wrote it on Amazon, and I wrote No! And they said, oh, you know, we'll send your order number to the customer service, they'll have it.
I've already reached that pinnacle.
I've called a couple times.
Jane,
Oh, no, he's here.
you mentioned you don't have to charge.
You got pictures of
Sorry,
everybody gets to go.
leave your name and information, number, I'll call you back. I'm thinking probably this actual, this has got to be.
I think I have to have that. You do? Hey! Gee, I wish I had realized that. Yeah. Well, what's amazing is LL, his dad, was mayor of Senoia in the early 1900s. And then Dad was our youngest, there's a contest. If I were mayor. And so,
so want to go to like the signs in town. At the very end, the Senoia signs, because they draw beautifully.
Yeah.
So